Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar brought to you by the Collective Consulting on Global Secure Access. Let's dive right into it. So, my name is Robbe van den Dalen. I will be the host for this session today. I'm a security consultant and SOC engineer at the Collective Consulting. I'm also 2 times Microsoft Security MVP, so both in Microsoft Identity and Access Management and CMAN XDR, being Defender XDR, Microsoft Sentinel, etc. Also a board member of the MC2MC Microsoft community. So I do a lot of stuff with Microsoft, basically. Today I will be bringing for you the Global Secure Access webinar. So we'll be talking about what is Microsoft Global Secure Access, basically the fundamentals, what are the 3 traffic profiles we can use, some real-world use cases we will be bringing in this section, in this workshop. Then we will also talk about some integration scenarios. How can we actually use global secure access within our environment, the licensing, and at the end we will end with a live Q&A session. So first of all, who are we? Who is the Collective? So the company I am working with, we're basically a company that is specialized in mainly Microsoft security tools, and we're guiding our customers into securing their environment, making sure that everything is secure, neat, etc. We're forward thinking and really drive our customers to a highly secure IT environment. So let's start with the fundamentals. So first of all, I wanted to start this webinar with a poll, and as actually asking you what is currently your primary remote access model. Are you using a traditional VPN like FortiGate or FortiVPN or other vendors? Are you using a mix of a VPN solution and a SSE/ZTNA solution? Are you mainly on a SSE solution already? Or do you use or mainly rely on SaaS applications? Normally, I do have a poll over here in the Teams thingy, so let me launch that. And if everything works well, you should be able to submit your answer. So let's see what the main responses are here. One person answered ZTNA, SSE. Check the response details. Okay, I see some traditional VPN, a mix of both. Some people see as well. Most of the people use traditional VPN. Okay, great. So let's talk about global secure access, right? Let me quickly close this poll. Close poll. Just like that. So what is global secure access? Basically, global secure access can do a couple of things. So the first use case scenario with global secure access is, for example, we want to provide remote access for our employees working remote or hybrid, for example, access to private resources hosted on-premise, Azure, wherever you like, and replace our current VPN solution to a more traditional SASE solution, micro-segmented, etc. Global Secure Access is also a solution that can be used to secure your environment against threats like network-related threats. So then we are mainly looking into the internet access profiles, which we will talk about. So basically, a firewall that will protect your network environment. Global Secure Access also tries to simplify your IT because we kind of combine a network solution stack with the identity stack of Microsoft and the Defender stack, Intune stack, etc. So we can basically provide seamless integration with your VPN solution into the current Microsoft ecosystem you're probably already using. So in a graphical overview, we have basically global secure access at the center, and at the left-hand side, we have your employees that want to connect to specific resources. So any employee from any location, any platform, any device, you want to basically give secure access to either private resources, but also PaaS applications, SaaS websites, on-premise hosted resources, or Microsoft 365. How do we do it? Of how does Global Secure Access do this in the background? We basically build Global Secure Access with Microsoft native tools and use different signals to decide whether a person is allowed to go to a certain resource. So again, on-premise, Microsoft 365, internet access, it doesn't matter. So we check which user is trying to connect. Is the user related with any risk signal? Is the user connecting from a trusted device, for example? What is the application that is trying to connect? What is the location? And all of these signals we use to eventually decide whether that user is able to log in into the destination resource or not. We can allow it, we can block it, we can even do some step-up authentication. And these are all the things I actually want to talk about in this workshop. So if we want to combine these different things, there are two main differences within Global Secure Access or the Microsoft SSE solution. And at the left-hand side, we have internet access, and at the right-hand side, we have private access, meaning we can either allow access to resources on the internet, being the internet access profile, or we can allow access to users to private access resources at the right-hand side, so hosted privately. I already want to talk a bit about the supported platforms, because which users can we actually give access? Currently, there are a couple of platforms already supported. Microsoft is still expanding this a lot. But here you can see that we can do global secure access with Windows devices. This is actually already general available as well. We have Windows on ARM, which is currently in public preview, but can be used already. We have macOS that is supported, again, general available. Android devices, so even your mobile devices can be secured, again, general available. And then we have iOS devices still in public preview. We also have an agentless mode of bringing users into the global secure access connections, which we will talk about later, where we can build some IPsec tunnels with remote branches, etc. As you can see on the slide, for Windows and macOS, the requirement is that your devices are hybrid or Entra joint in your tenant. For mobile devices, the requirement is that the devices are registered into your tenant. So let's go ahead with the three access profiles in Global Secure Access, and this will actually be the backbone of this presentation. So first of all, we will be talking about the private access profile, giving access to your remote workers to private resources. This is basically your typical point-to-sign VPN replacement. So instead of deploying a VPN client on the user's device, we will be deploying Global Secure Access, and that Global Secure Access client will be tunneling the traffic to your private resources. The second profile is the Internet Access profile, which provides secure access to all internet resources, so SaaS applications and websites, basically. Here we are deploying a secure web gateway, let's say, or in other words, your firewall replacement. So basically a networking firewall that can be used on any location from the world and not having to tunnel you through your on-premise firewalls. Then the third profile we will be talking about is the Microsoft Access profile. And this is a specific profile which can be used to access everything that is Microsoft related or any app that is integrated in Entra ID, basically. With this profile, we can introduce reduced latency to, for example, Teams, Exchange, and all the other applications, but also require phishing-resistant authentication by using Global Secure Access. So first of all, we want to talk about the private access profile. So here you can see a generic overview of how private access works. So at the middle, we have the global secure access backbone with different points of presence throughout the world. And eventually, we will be using conditional access policies to decide which user is able to which kind of applications. These conditional access policies use continuous access evaluation to continuously check is that user still able to access that application, or if the user changes location, or maybe if the device is uncompliant, we can actually block access in real time via those signals mentioned earlier. So the cool thing here is that we use dedicated tunnels to tunnel the user to the destination resources. And the tunneling to those destination resources, which you can see at the right-hand side, are actually exposed via private access connectors being said. And these private access connectors are hosted on virtual machines. So you basically place a virtual machine inside your environment where the access needs to be provided. You place the private access connector on there, and the private access connector is calling an outbound connection to the global secure access POP, allowing the users to tunnel via that outbound connection inside of your environment. So the interesting thing here is that there is no port forwarding needed. You do not need to do any destination netting on your firewall and allow users to go from the outside to the inside of your network. The private network connectors are just doing outbound calls and then pulling the users in to eventually access those resources. So there are two deployment methods we can use for private access. First of all, we have a lift and shift scenario where we have the customer case that you want to move away from your current VPN solution and use private access instead. The deployment method for private access is called quick access in this case. And here we just say we move away from the VPN, you go to private access, and we just gave everyone access to a couple of applications and basically lift and shift your old solution to private access. There also is a second way of deploying private access, which is more into micro-segmentation, where we can say those specific groups or personas can access those applications, and only another set of groups can use another set of applications. So even though we can do a lift and shift and just give everyone access to the same set of applications, we can also do very granular micro-segmentation as well. So talking about the first deployment with private access being the quick access deployment, as I said, it's just a lift and shift replacement. And we basically deploy a connector inside your network where the private applications live and tunnel your users through that private access connector so they can get that access. The interesting thing to mention here is that the private access connector I am talking about, which is installed in your network, is actually built upon the Microsoft Entra application proxy. It's just with an extra layer on it for private access. So it's actually not a very new technology. It's a technology that is used a lot already, but just enhanced for the private access scenarios. The cool thing with quick access, so the lift and shift scenario, is that you can get insights into which users are actually using which applications. So here you can see an overview of the destination FQDNs that the users in this case are using, and you can then drill through each destination FQDN and see which kind of users are using which applications exactly, which helps you in transitioning to a micro-segmentation network instead. So if you now have the case, I want to go to private access, but I do not know which users are using which applications really, we can actually start off with quick access, then give you those insights, and then we can migrate to a micro-segmented deployment. If you actually get to that micro-segmented deployment, we call it the per app access deployment, we can decide which user or which persona is able to access which specific application. And Interesting to mention here is that instead of building an IPsec tunnel like most traditional VPN clients do, private access is using MTLS, which means that we create a tunnel for each session that is being created. So there is no active tunnel that is always open for the whole time that the VPN is connected, but instead, private access or the global secure access client on the devices is there in the background. And when the user tries to access a application that is privately hosted, global secure access recognizes that, builds an MTLS tunnel, and once the user closes the application, the MTLS tunnel is also closed again. Again, making sure that the tunnel is only opened when the user is actually still secure and inside the security policies defined. The second profile is the internet access profile, as mentioned before. And with internet access, we want to provide access to everything that is not privately hosted, basically. So websites, SaaS applications that are out in the internet. And here we want to make sure that the connection to those websites is secured, regulated, etc. So a couple of internet access features, and there are actually Microsoft is building these at a very fast pace. So there are a couple of features that aren't on here yet. But the most important features I wanted to talk about is web content filtering, which basically allows you as an administrator to decide for which users can access which types of websites. So you can block specific liability websites or websites you do not trust, and allow other websites for other personas. We can also do TLS inspection policies, so basically making sure that we can inspect HTTPS traffic as well, because HTTPS is normally encrypted, giving you a blind spot of what the traffic is actually doing inside those HTTPS packets. So we can do TLS inspection profiles with a bring your own certificate if you want to, which allows for extended logging and inspection of those traffic packets. A third feature is threat intelligence policies, where we use Microsoft Threat Intelligence, which is a lot of indicators to actually block on or alert on high severity threats. So if Microsoft knows that a certain website is a phishing website, for example, and is a high severity threat, we can use that intel to block your users from going to those websites, even though they are still in an allowed category, for example. The big plus with internet access is that it is identity centric. It's built within conditional access, it's built within Entra ID, so we can enforce conditional access policies and even do some fancy stuff like temporarily allowing access for certain web categories via privileged access management, access packages, whatever. So if you have a use case in your business where you temporarily want to allow a specific application or a website for a specific set of users, they can request that access, and that access is automatically revoked again, which aligns very well with a persona-based design. And then the last feature is actually a pretty new feature which they introduced, which is AI Gateway Prompt Shielding. So with this feature, we can actually use global secure access, internet access to block malicious prompts and jailbreak attempts. And we can do that on the network level. So we can inspect what is happening when a user is doing prompts in OpenAI or any other tool, and actually prevent data exfiltration or even jailbreak attempts of the AI. So an example of how this might look like. So at the top, we have for example, marketing user, so a persona in your organization where you only want to allow specific access to websites. You want to allow them to go to Facebook or any other social media platform, but you do not want to allow them to go to code repositories because a marketing user doesn't really need to do that. That's something we can build with internet access, and then, for example, create a different persona and other policies for a SecOps users doing the exact opposite. Then a SecOps user is able to go to code repositories and other stuff, but is not allowed to go to social media, for example. So here you can see how we can very granularly build the access profiles like you do in a firewall, for example, based on the type of user that is using global secure access. Another feature is the remote network access. So I mentioned before the couple of clients that are supported for global secure access, which is Windows, macOS, iOS, Android, etc. But let's say you have a user that is using a thin client, for example, at a remote site in your offices. Then we can actually build IPsec tunnels between the firewalls or the routing equipment at that branch office, build those IPsec tunnels with global secure access, allowing you to also tunnel devices or traffic from devices that cannot have a global secure access client installed through global secure access, and making sure those internet traffic is also secured. So here you can actually see an example of how we can do that in Azure specifically. This is a redundant setup with two IPsec tunnels. So if one IPsec tunnel goes down, we fall back to another. But it really doesn't matter what the CPE, so the equipment at your bench site can be a FortiGate, can be a checkpoint firewall, or other network equipment. So that was the second profile. The third profile we want to talk about is the Microsoft Access profile, focusing on giving secure access to everything that is Microsoft related or integrated in Entra ID. So the first cool feature of the Microsoft Access profile is that it really reduces the latency of your access to Microsoft resources. And I have a demo of that at the end of the session, where we can see that when we do not use global secure access, we have a certain latency to Microsoft resources. But once we switch on the global secure access client, you will see that the latency drops to, for example, Microsoft Teams. The second feature is phishing resistant. So if you use global secure access, we can guarantee you phishing resistant authentication for your users, making sure that you're protected against typical access token stealing attacks or MFA bypasses that are happening in the wild now. It's a great alternative for FIDO keys and passkeys. So if you're trying to get your users into phishing-resistant authentication, but are struggling with passkey enrollments or struggling with buying the physical hardware keys, this is actually a great alternative to make sure that access is still phishing-resistant without hardware equipment needed. There is also no egress IP list or hairpinning needed to go to Microsoft 365 resources. The source IP is always known, so it's great opportunity for to enrich your logs basically. With that, I get to the enriched N365 logs feature. So you get more information about the source device, the real source IP. You can even have some extended logging for file event logs and SharePoint data, which is a great added benefit. And then the last feature is the coexistence with other third-party solutions. So even if you're still using a VPN solution today, and you do not want to move away from that, but you want to use the Microsoft 365 Access profile to secure your Microsoft environment, this can be done if you want to. And this is basically a picture that shows that. So if you say, I do not want the private access profile of global secure access, I also do not want the internet access profile, we can perfectly install global secure access next to your current solution and only use global secure access for Microsoft traffic to make sure that at least the Microsoft traffic is phishing resistant, reduced latency, and all those stuff. So then a couple of integration scenarios. So what can we really do with global secure access? The first thing I wanted to talk about is just-in-time and just enough access with Entra-ID privileged identity management. So let's say that you want to give access to private resources, for example, servers via RDP or SSH to your administrators. You can actually integrate that with PIM and Entra-ID, if that sounds familiar, to make sure that a administrator needs to elevate their privileges or maybe with an approval flow before they can access a server. So this is actually what you can see here. In this case, we have a user. Let me see if I can take a pointer. So here at the left-hand side, we have a user that is requesting access via PIM and Entra ID. Then PIM says, before you can access this resource, you need to do MFA or maybe an approval flow. And once that is completed, they get access to a role assignable group, which will give them access to private resources hosted with Global Secure Access. Then again, the access is revoked after X period of time, making sure that the administrators do not have standing access to your RDP service, for example, and only have the access that they really need. We can also secure some modern or basic networking protocols with new modern authentication. So a great example is SSH, for example. If you're using SSH or another protocol that doesn't support MFA, we can actually use private access to do MFA because we can require an administrator to first perform MFA and Entra ID before they can access an SSH server. So this is basically kind of a privileged access management solution that you're building in this case, requiring a step-up authentication for protocols that don't really support it. We can also enforce device authentication. So if you say you can only go to these servers when you're coming from a compliant device, for example, that's something we can build. We can also block network access to your private resources if the device is compromised or if the user account is compromised. We can block risky users and risky sign-ins. So we can really make sure that access is only granted when all of the checkboxes are checked. It also integrates with the identity lifecycle management and Entra ID. So if a user is onboarded from an HR system and you have an automatic onboarding process, we can perfectly align Global Secure Access with that onboarding process, making sure that when a user gets access to their organization, they directly get the correct VPN profiles or private access profiles or internet access profiles. And this is, in my opinion, a great shift because normally or traditionally the access to VPN solutions was now with the networking team. But with Global Secure Access, we actually shift the access to private resources via VPN, for example, to the identity team, which, in my opinion, makes a lot more sense to align that with the identity team. We can also align with a private link Azure resource deployment. If you're familiar with Azure, the recommendation is always to make sure that your Azure resources are private integrated. They do not have a public endpoint. But then, of course, yeah, you have a private application. Then you need to build VPN tunnels again to your Azure environment to make sure that users are able to access those applications. With this setup, we can build a private access connector in your Azure networks, making sure that the users are able to access your private applications that are private integrated in Azure with private access instead. So here a couple of things we mention is removing the point-to-site tunnel with bandwidth limits with a VPN gateway, because that's traditionally what most customers do. They deploy a VPN gateway in Azure and then give access this way. There are some bandwidth limitations with that, depending on how much users you tunnel. So we can be more flexible with that. There is no IPsec termination needed in Azure, so you will probably need less VM resources. There is no third-party gateway license needed. So there are a couple of benefits there. We can also do on-premise MFA using private access. I already talked a bit about SSH and other protocols where we can make sure that users need to do MFA before they can access those protocols. Specifically on Kerberos, we also have some cool features which we can use. So if you have privately hosted applications integrated in Active Directory with Kerberos, we can still make sure that that Kerberos SSO experience is being tunneled through private access and that that SSO experience is still the case and supported. We can actually do this both for Entra and hybrid joint devices, which again allows you to secure your authentication mechanisms for legacy protocols. A third feature is the deny direct access to domain controllers even. So let's say that your user is on-premise. Typically, if the user is on-premise, you do not tunnel everything to a VPN solution anymore. So what we can basically do is when a user tries to access an SMB server that is on-premise, the SMB server will say, hey, you need to authenticate. And then typically the user will access the domain controller and say, hey, I need a ticket for that SMB server, so a Kerberos ticket, so I am able to log in that SMB server. With private access, we can actually block those communications directly to the domain controller and say you're not allowed to get that ticket directly to the domain controller, but instead you need to go through private access. And the added benefit of doing that is that we can check, is that user on a compliant device? Is that user on a device that is compromised? Is that user a risky user or not? So we can have a couple of security checks before eventually allowing that user to get that Kerberos ticket. So we're not tunneling the SMB traffic to that SMB server via private access. We're just tunneling the Kerberos requests through private access, making sure that they only get Kerberos tickets when we have some extra checks in place. Another feature is source IP restoration. I'm actually checking the time a bit. Source IP restoration makes sure that Microsoft always knows the real IP address a user is connecting to. So if you're now using a third-party SSE solution to access Microsoft resources, then the problem is that Microsoft only sees the public IP address of the POP of that SSE solution. And a lot of customers don't know this, but this breaks a couple of things in Microsoft. If you use identity protection does not really see the real IP address of the user, which results in false positive detections for unfamiliar sign-ins, for example. Also, the Entra ID sign-in laws do not show the real sorted IP address, which is a hassle for investigations when a cyber incident, for example, happens, but also continuous access evaluation does not work properly in conditional access. So with the Microsoft profile specifically here, we can make sure that the real IP address is known for Microsoft resources and all of those things still work properly as expected. Another feature is the universal tenant restrictions. This is mainly to make sure that your users are not able to access specific external tenants that you do not want to allow. So if you're now using a proxy solution with tenant restrictions, you probably have a V2 policy, or you inject the tenant restriction policies into your network traffic. This is all more easily done with global secure access because we can just say in global secure access, these are the tenants users are not allowed to go to. And then in the background, global secure access ingests those policies into the network traffic. So this basically prevents data exfiltration both to graph, but also to other applications integrated in Entra ID. And then we actually get to the demo profiles. Let me take a sip of water first. So the first demo I have for you is the private access profile demo. And I took some videos because the demo gods are not always that kind. But in this video, we can see a global secure access client that shows we are connected to the internet, to private access, M365, etc. And in this demo, we will be accessing a server through SSH. And when we try to SSH, we see that a pop-up comes up of Global Secure Access saying to the user, hey, you need to do a step-up authentication. I want you to log in with a FIDO key before you can access the SSH server. Here you can see that the user is putting in its FIDO key, doing its authentication, and after the authentication with the FIDO key is done, we set up a terms of use policy. Again, you do not have to use this, but in this demo, we decided we want to put a terms of use policy before you are able to connect to the server. And only when the user accepts that term of use policy together with a phishing resistant authentication method, then you're allowed to go to that server. Um, so you can basically build a bit of your own PAM solution here. So here the user accepts it, and then you see that the user is able to access the SSH server. In this case, we put in our passwords, click enter, and then the user is on the machine. So this is actually a Windows machine, which is tunneled with SSH, and we can access that machine. So this is an example of how private access can be used to secure your access to your on-premise hosted machines, RDP, SSH, whatever protocol you want to use. In the second demo, we have the internet access profile, where we want to show you how you can configure your cloud firewall, to call it like that, to only allow specific users to specific types of websites. So this is the admin portal, basically, where we have a baseline security profile with a policy in it that says, with this policy, we target all websites. And this is basically, if you have some experience with network firewalls, you always have a block all policy at the bottom of your firewall, blocking everything, and then you build allows on top of that. This is basically what we do here. We block everything in the baseline profile to all websites for all users, so you don't have internet access. And then we can build other security profiles. We have a profile for all our users in the environment, and then a specific profile for IT personnel, for example. In this case, we can go to the policies that are related to all of our users, and then we say you are allowed to go to these kind of websites. So artificial intelligence, dating and personal, image sharing, business, the typical thing that we want to allow for all our users. And then we have a different persona for IT personnel, for example, allowing a bit more than the normal users. So here you can see that we can choose which users can do what. And then this is eventually enforced via conditional access, because conditional access is the backbone of Enter ID. Also for global secure access, we say for all internet destinations tunneled through global secure access, for these users, we assign this persona. So this conditional access policy is triggered or set to all users linked to that global secure access profile. And then all of the users can get access to those type of websites. So this is kind of the admin experience. We wanted to show how you can build these kind of secure internet access profiles with global secure access. Then we have the Microsoft Access Profile demos. I actually have two of them. So the first demo is about the connectivity. So if you go to connectivity.m365.cloud.microsoft, you can do a connectivity test and see what the latency is from your device to some Microsoft applications like Teams, etc. And if I did this without Global Secure Access enabled, you can see that I am in the top 58% of the people nearby with the best network connection. So not that great, I'm somewhere in the middle. And you can even see that for some reason, even though I am in Europe, the exchange front door that is being used for me is in South Africa. So a bit strange, but apparently it's tunneled through there, and actually my connection is not that great. When I do the same thing with Global Secure Access enabled from the same Wi-Fi from the same device, so nothing changed. You can already see that I'm in the top 22% of the people using Microsoft services. And actually, my front door for SharePoint is also changed from South Africa to Europe. So just by tunneling your Microsoft traffic to Global Secure Access, Microsoft ensures that the traffic is being routed in the most optimal way, which eventually makes sure that your team's calling performance is better, that your exchange connections are better, and all that stuff. And then the second demo I wanted to show about Microsoft Access Profile is how we can actually secure your SaaS applications that are integrated with Entra ID. So here we build a policy saying for this specific user, which in my case is my test user, I want to harden the access to an application called eNow, and this is actually an application that is SSO integrated in Entra ID. Here we say for all applications or all networks, excluding networks from a Global Secure Access, we want to block access. So basically, you can only access this SSO integrated application when you come from Global Secure Access client. Here you can see that this is just an SSO integrated app, so no Microsoft app, it's just integrated in Entra ID. And when I go to this application with Global Secure Access disabled and try to sign in into that application, you will see that my access is being revoked. So here I log in with my account, and you see you cannot access this right now. Then I enable my Global Secure Access client. You will get a pop-up saying, hey, we are connecting you, client enabled. And then if we just wait a bit until the green icon is there, like that, we are connected. If we then try to sign in to that same application, so picking the account over here, you will see that we are able to access that application and log into it. So even though you do not have control of the application because it's a third party, it's a SaaS application that you're using, just by integrating your login with Entra ID and using the Microsoft profile of Global Secure Access, we can make sure that we harden the logins to those SaaS applications and thus making sure you can only log in with a phishing resistant MFA like Global Secure Access is doing. So we talked about the different features, etc. But then the biggest question for most of our clients is, what about licensing? So Global Secure Access works on a per user license. And for the different profiles that I talk about, there are a different set of licenses. So first of all, for the Microsoft Access profile, the only requirement is that your users have an Entra ID P1 or P2. For most of our customers, that is already the case. So if your users have a Microsoft Entra P1 or P2 license, you can actually start using Microsoft Access Profile already without having to do anything else. Then we have the Internet Access Profile. For that, you also need an Entra P1 or P2 as a requirement, but also need an extra license, which is called the Microsoft Entra Internet Access license. If you have the Entra Suite, that license is included in there as well. So you can either choose to specifically buy an Internet Access license for a user, or you can give them the Suite, which gives you much more, of course. The private profile is the exact same, so you need an Entra P1 or P2 as a requirement, and then you need the Microsoft Entra Private Access license. So you have the flexibility if you want to say, I only want to use private access, then you can just buy private access licenses, or if you only want to do internet access, that's also the case. If you want to do both, you can use or buy a private access license and an internet access license, or you can just buy the Microsoft Entra Suite, which gives you access to both of them and a couple of other features as well. I also talked about the remote access feature. So if you want to build IPsec tunnels from a remote branch and give access for users to global secure access as well, you can also need a P1 or P2. You need to buy internet access licenses with a minimum of 50 licenses, and the more licenses you buy, the more bandwidth you get. But that's something we would need to deep dive on if this is the case, how much bandwidth you need and how much bandwidth or how much licenses you need to buy for that. So a couple of typical project phases we want to close off this session with is phase one, and is a Microsoft Access profile deployment. And this is actually a pretty easy deployment because most of our customers do not really need an extra license for that. It might be the case for you as well. And you just deploy your global secure access clients to the operating systems. You enable the Microsoft Access profile, and then you can start deploying new policies, like, for example, requiring a phishing-resistant authentication alternative with global secure access in order to access certain Microsoft-integrated SaaS applications. In a second phase, we can do private access profiles, where we help you migrate your current VPN solution to private access quick access, just making sure that the users stop using the VPN and start using private access. And then with the application discovery insights I showed you earlier, we can move you to a layer 7 microsegmented per ad basis access scenario. So really making sure that only a specific set of users are able to go to specific applications. And in phase three, we can do internet access profile, where we build your internet access rules in your current on-premise firewall in global secure access internet access, allowing you to make sure that the users that are working remotely without a full VPN tunnel are also secured with the internet access profile, and make sure that only specific traffic is allowed. In a fourth phase, we can align everything with your lifecycle management, making sure that when a user onboards, that they get the right private access profiles, they get the right internet access profiles, they get the right M365 access or security policies. So again, making sure that giving access to your users is really streamlined. And then in the last phase, we deploy the advanced features that I talked about earlier. So if you want to do some PIM elevations, if you want to secure traffic with compliant network checks, if you want to enforce MFA on premise and making sure direct access to domain controllers isn't allowed, we can do that, work that out with you, and make sure that that we harden that environment with these features. So I'm ending with a call to action. I'm actually checking 10 minutes, right on time. So the biggest call to action for this would be start using the Microsoft Access profile now. Most of the environments already have an Android P1 or P2 license. So if you have those licenses, you can just start using it. You can make sure that access to Microsoft and other apps is phishing resistant. Your logs are being improved. Your latency to M365 is being improved. So you can actually do a lot of great stuff without having to buy any extra license. Then I want to end with another poll. What is your evaluation timeline for GSA? Are you already evaluating or not? Do you want to do a pilot in 3 months, 6 months, maybe beyond 6 months? Are you only researching? Really curious. And what is the reason that you're following this webinar, basically? So let me quickly get to the results. A couple of people in 3 months, a couple of people mainly researching, some people already doing some pilots in 3 to 6 months. Okay, it's interesting to see. And with that, we get to the end of the webinar. And we can end with a Q&A round. So let's see if I see any questions in chat or in the Q&A section. I'm not sure if
People
you're
can
able to.
also unmute themselves if
Oh,
they
okay,
want
that's
to ask
great.
you a question.
So feel free to come on mute if you have some questions, and then we can dive into that. If I'm correct, I do not see questions in the chat. Also not in the Q&A section. Oh, there is one. Hi, Robert, thanks for the presentation. Can we integrate this with Azure Virtual Desktop to enhance our security posture? Yes. So indeed, we can use Azure Virtual Desktop with Global Secure Access to enhance that security posture. There are a couple of things we can do. So if you're using Azure Virtual Desktop single session hosts, we can definitely do that. That's a supported scenario. Um, I would have to double check in the current public docs, but I think that multi-session host is currently an issue for that, but I have to check that, so don't take me on that one. There is also a new feature that is introduced with Azure Virtual Desktops for B2B users. So if you, for example, have a third party that you want to allow access to your private resources with Azure Virtual Desktop, we can give the account or the users access to Azure Virtual Desktop with a B2B account, and then tunnel that B2B traffic also with private access. So depending on how you use Azure Virtual Desktops in a single session or multi-session environment, we can already do some things with that. And then a second question. Oh, it's the same question. So the Azure Virtual Desktop question. I hope that helps. If not, happy to extend on that. Okay. If there are no extra questions in the comments and Q&A, and no one is coming off mute, I think we can close off this webinar. So again, thank you for following this webinar. If you do have some questions, please feel free to reach out to us. If you're interested in doing a POC, a proof of concept with Global Secure Access, we're more than happy to do so. So yeah, thank you for joining, and maybe we see each other later.